Well, hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here, Senior Pastor at Cornerstone Church in Marshfield. And I want to just say to you who are a part of the Cornerstone community, thank you for hanging in there these days. I confess, I feel like I can relate better to the Apostle Paul, who wrote these letters to churches with whom he couldn't have face-to-face conversations. And of course we have options here, but it's just not the same right now. We're not engaged in the same kinds of conversations we used to be. And I'm reminded this morning of Paul's words from the book of Philippians as he expresses his love for the church. And I want to borrow Paul's words and share them with you this morning, because this expresses how I feel about you, and I want you to hear this. Paul writes in chapter 1, verse 3 of Philippians, he says, "I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, for you all, making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. It's right for me to feel this way about you all, because I hold you in my heart, for you're all partakers with me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness how I yearn for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. And it's my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and the praise of God." Church, I love you. And my heart hurts for you, for us, as we walk through this time of uncertainty and angst together. And I just got to tell you, I'm sad for our nation. I'm sad for how we're dividing over things that we never would have even dreamed of dividing over 6 months ago. And I'm sad that these divisions have shown up in our churches, including ours. Now, I want to be clear. I believe that there are some things that we must divide over. There are convictions we have that will lead us even to stand our ground to the point of death. And I don't say that flippantly. But church, my desire for you and for all of us is that first and foremost, our commitment would be to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that we, as people of Christ, would be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, and we would be filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. And so I want to be as clear as I can, and I understand that's not always a given these days. But if you think one way about wearing masks, I love you. I care about you. I want God's blessing for you. I want you to experience His fullness. And if you think another way about wearing masks, I want you to know something else. I love you. I care about you. I want God's blessing for you, and I want you to experience His fullness. And church, as your pastor, I want to ask you for something. I want to ask that as you engage these issues, and I understand it's not fair to ask you not to, okay? These things are consequential. They matter, and I understand, at least I think I do, why they elicit such passion for many of us. And yet, in that passion and in that conviction, I want to ask that we not disparage each other, that we not disparage our community because of our diversity related on issues, about issues related to the virus. But instead, I ask that we remain united in the gospel, which is our foundation. It's Jesus Christ, what He has done for us. And with that in mind, that we remain united in what Jesus taught. You remember what Jesus taught, right? The most important things, that we love God with heart, soul, mind, and strength, and that we love our neighbor as ourself. This is the great commandment. And so with every conversation, with every post, with every internal reflection, every attitude of the heart, may we, even in the midst of our angst, and I get it, I get that we're angsty these days, there's a lot to be angsty about, but may we capture those things for the love of God and neighbor. And as we do, I'm convinced that we're going to get through this, not as those divided under the lesser things, but as those resolute in our commitment to the gospel of Jesus Christ, to our commitment to make that gospel known to our community and beyond. And church, eventually the masks debate is going to go away, but isn't it true the gospel will remain? The gospel is going to stay with us. Let's remain resolute in our commitment to the gospel. And church, Here's the reality. I'm a mess, and that's true. I'm not just saying that. I'm a mess these days. I have ups and downs, but there's a lot going on in my head and my heart these days, and I'm grateful for God's grace. You know what else? You're a mess too. We're a messy people. But God's grace, the same grace that's enough for me, is enough for you. And God is holding us close to Himself these days. I'm convinced of it. Now, as best I can, within that context, I want to describe to you a little bit of what our plan is, again, for the next number of weeks. Thank you for hanging with me this far. It means a lot to me that you're hearing me out on these things. But here's some of the more specifics. Our desire is to do the best we can to provide safe options within the legal parameters of our environment. And so before the new executive order came out last week, we were actually prepared to roll out a plan that we thought we were going to be able to stay with for the next number of months. Now, since the schools are starting to meet in person, we were going to roll out some child programming. We were going to have a masks optional service continued, but also have a masks only service, as well as continue our online. And with that in mind, we thought we had a great plan. We actually finished it Thursday morning, and then Thursday afternoon, the new executive order came out. And so here we go again, making changes, and it is what it is, right? And our position is that, as I mentioned last week, the wearing of masks doesn't violate our moral and biblical conscience, and so we're going to comply. And of course, that changed our plans for the options that we would provide. Now we're asking everybody to wear masks because that's the law of the land. Now, some of you ask, is there ever a time to practice civil disobedience or conscientious objection? And I would say, sure, absolutely there is. Some have recently said the time is now. And I understand their position, and I respect it. But as best as we can discern as an elder board, we feel like the best way that we can love our community well is to voluntarily participate in what our state officials are requiring of our communities. And so that said, that's what we're going to do. But that said, even within the current legal framework, we have plenty of good options. And so with that, we're going to exercise those options in as responsible a way as we can, not with fear, but with care. And there's a difference. And so this is our plan moving forward. On August 16th, just in a couple weeks here, we're going to go back to a more normal two-service schedule. It'll be at 8:55 and at 10:30. If you remember, 5-6 months ago, that's when we used to meet. We're going to go back to those times. 10:45 gets a little bit late with our attendance trends the way they've been. We think we can do that plenty responsibly. We'll still alternate which rows people are going to sit in, so you're not sitting in the same row as somebody else. But we can go back to 10:30 for our second service very safely. Now, also on August 16th, we're planning to close our child-friendly venue. I love it that our team put together some things that were options for families. Turns out that not a lot of families chose to exercise that option, and that's okay. We're going to continue to try things and see what works, and when they don't work, we're going to move on. And that's what we're going to do on August 16th. But with that said, I'm excited to tell you that we're going to start to open up some children's programming. And that means for our infants through our kindergartners, we're going to have options during the first hour, that 8:55 hour, on Sunday the 16th. So for our infants and toddlers, we're going to have nursery for the full service. And then for our pre-K and K, we're going to have children's church. And we're looking forward to that. We'll give you more details about how that'll look next week. But I encourage you to plan for that, families, as you think about next week. Now, the other thing to mention is that we're also looking forward to the fall. And we hope to open up a full palette of children's programming through 6th grade starting September 13th. I want you to know that. This is how we're thinking. We're planning to stay aligned with the schools, and if they're meeting in person, we feel like we can do that as well. And so I'm excited about this. Of course, it can change, and yet this is the direction that we're headed. Church, I love you, and I invite you, I implore you, to stay united in the gospel on the main things. And these lesser things, certainly engage in public dialogue and have conversation and make arguments, but do it with a spirit of love and a spirit of commitment to the great commandment that we love God and love neighbor. may God be glorified as we seek to be a biblical community that loves God, grows people, serves our city, and reaches the world. Hope to see you soon. God bless.